Hey guys, Frank here with another episode of Modern Church Leader. Pumped for today's show, man. We're going to talk about kind of digital transformation with my buddy Darrel, all the way from Brentwood Baptist. Darrel, it's good to have you on the show, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me on.
We were chatting before. I mean, it's been a long time, so it's
It has.
good to reconnect. And we
Yeah.
both have middle schoolers, which
We
is
do.
we won't talk about that on the podcast, but or we have kids going into middle school, so we're in that stage of life, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's you put a lot more effort into prayer than you previously had.
I will say, again, not the topic of the show, but you have a boy going into middle school?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so I have my boys going into middle school. I feel like parenting is getting actually more complicated, like harder, not easier. And people often say oh, boys are easy and whatever. But I as they're getting into they're not teenagers yet, but they're headed that direction, middle school, I feel like, it's getting more emotional, right? Like the heart stuff is a bigger part of it. And that's way harder than
it's way harder.
Regular keep you alive stuff.
Yes, it is. It's I always say look, my job is to keep you alive. If I can do that, it's a win. But then all of a sudden around that 11-year-old, 11-year-old, it's my wife and I are when did we get the teenager? When did he show up? It's nobody notified. I didn't get an Apple notification on my phone that says your teenager's arrived. Yeah. And apparently he did.
Oh, anyways. Well, it's good to see you, man. So let's just kind of jump in. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and how what you do at Brentwood and how you got into ministry and serving in your role? Yeah. Give us the short version of the journey.
Yeah. So I'm at Brentwood Baptist Church. We're located in Brentwood, Tennessee. We've got 9 locations all throughout the Middle Tennessee area. I oversee communications, which is basically everything you think from digital, which is the web, media, mobile, design, video, post-production. It's a whole wide range of things along with the social media as well. Before that, I spent 12 years as a creative director at Lifeway Christian Resources. And so I always said I would never go into church, never do church work. And then all of a sudden I was I maybe would do it. And then all of a sudden I was actually close friends with our senior pastor. And so we just began this dialogue of what would it look like to help the church transition into the new world.
Yeah.
And before you knew it, I'm here on staff at church. I'm now going on 10 years, which I can't believe I'm saying that.
So you've been working for churches in the...
Yeah, in that
25 years.
Yeah, it's 25 years. So yeah, it's a space that I've known really well. And on the side, I've also had the opportunity to work and create I co-created a Facebook group called Church Communications. I think right now they're at 25,000 members. That was a fun thing to do. It was a fun thing to start that community. So this is a world that I've kind of been immersed in straight out of college. And so I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, I love it.
Really
communications is a lot for churches. A lot of churches, like Brentwood is a big church, serves a lot of people in that community, been around for a long time. Most churches don't have a comms person, let alone a comms team that's doing all the things. So you kind of have a somewhat unique. I mean, there are plenty of churches out there that have, what you guys do. But if you take the 300 and some odd thousand churches in America, probably 80% of them don't have a comms person full time, right? Some volunteer doing websites and social media and that kind of stuff.
I think social media kind of changed that a little bit where you're right. It was one of those things where you don't have a lot. This is a unique position. Yeah. But within that, a lot of pastors saw, and understandably so, wait, we got this thing called social media. Somebody's got to do that. And I joke, a lot of times it was a student minister. If there was one, they just I say they just threw the keys to Facebook and said, here, can you do something with this? And so that's kind of morphed. So I'm finding more and more churches are I've actually had a lot of consulting with churches where I've had conversations where we need to build this thing out. I don't know what it's going to look like for us. And so we start having the conversations of what's the first thing we need to bring on board? What are the volunteers we need to get? So the good news is I think it's a growing field and it's one that churches are realizing it's more important. I think social media was one of the catalysts for that.
Yeah. I mean, social media and then probably COVID.
COVID. COVID.
Maybe the second thing that
yes.
not even catalyst. It just forced every church to get more digital. I'd love to hear your perspective. Like, since you've been 10 years at the church, what has the progression been like? What have you seen? How's it changed all the way into like, what does it look like today?
Yeah. So when I came on board, we were heavily invested in a very much a print-based culture where everything was like you had your weekly bulletin. Every quarter we did a magazine. Our website had no mobile functionality. Like there was no mobile version of the website. It was just there was the website, and then you had an app, and all it really did was play the sermons. So, and the team and the volunteers were all based around that process. And so we had like 3 graphic designers. Because it just, you start thinking through that, you got to go, wow, it's really heavily based on this, and all of our systems and processes are based around that.
Right.
So over time, we had to ask the question, like, what's our end game? What are we really trying to do? And when we started asking those questions about disciple making and what that looks like, and we started saying, okay, where is our people? Where's the person in the pew? And so what I started doing, I started pulling numbers from Google Analytics. I was like, hey guys, every year our mobile growth is 3 to 5%. So every year that number that's at 50 is going to be at 55, 60, 70. It's going to incrementally grow. And so you start asking those questions and start pointing stuff out. So what we had to do was, over time, we had to kind of set a vision for where we wanted to be, and then figure out and help team members. Certain team members were like, I'm bought and sold into this vision. And certain team members were like, this isn't really where I see my gifting. And so we had to help offboard them, find new opportunities for them, and bring new people on board. So I will tell you, it's not been easy. It's been painful in some respects. Painful because we still have what I would call some legacy things that people really held on to. The bulletin. Yeah. The bulletin. To this day, I still get, where's the bulletin? I'm like, I understand that. I do. Actually, honestly, I think we've come to realize what this has forced us to do, and I think in a good way, is we do print on occasion. We do some stuff that's like an actual hard artifact.
Right.
But what it does, it makes that thing so much more special. So we're about to celebrate our pastor. Our pastor is retiring after 32 years of ministry here at the church. So I'm going to do a full-on magazine with like big picture, big images of big spreads of all the work he's done, just beautiful historical images. And we're going to print like 2,000 copies of it.
Right.
Could I do that as like a mobile page? I totally could have, but people are going to want to hold on to it. They're going to put it on their coffee table. So I think in some respects, it's made that stuff much more special, but the digital has also forced our team to be a lot faster. It's forced us to figure out, how do we separate ourselves from the crowd? And that's what digital for us has done, is it's asked the question like, okay, if we just go get a graphic like everybody else and post the graphic online, great, we're like everybody else. But what's the thing we can do that contextualizes our stuff, that makes it feel like us, but makes our audience resonates with our audience, because there's authenticity there. So what that means is, staffing wise, it means I had to get more photographers. And say, your job is to be at every event, and then you're going to capture that thing. And within a matter of 30 minutes, I want everything on Instagram. Like it's that kind of like speed. For us, I think one of the digital things that we had to walk through was it's okay to go like, hey, we're going to be a little less creation mode and a little more documentation mode. Like it's okay to like just document and go. And the audience is going to reward us. And then analytics for us have shown us over time that when we do stuff like that, the audience always rewards us.
Like I'm thinking about like that transformation. What happened like once COVID hit, or after you came through COVID, or whatever? I mean, I don't hate it, but it's like a weird question because we're 3 years out kind of thing. But I think it was a moment that like really changed a lot of churches, and those like ripple effects are still kind of playing out to some extent. And you have a unique view in terms of what you were mentioning pre-show, right? Like the going more digital and COVID being a bit of a catalyst in that direction. Like what's changed for you guys even since then?
Yeah, I think for us, what's changed for us is that we began to realize for us is that our people actually want to gather together. And I think beforehand, it was like, there was, when we did an event, it was like, it is what it is. Like, okay, we're doing an event. That's great. Now, all of a sudden, I think what's changed for us is people actually have a longing and a hunger actually to be near other people. So it's kind of funny. What it's forced us to do is become a little more event based, in the sense of like, how do I capture? How do I How do I tell the story of an event? How do I make you kind of think I'll have a little bit of FOMO about missing out from the event?
Right.
And that's because, again, our event attendance numbers are through the roof. So for that, there's been that change post-COVID where we didn't think that was going to be the case. We thought everything was going to be online. And then our people snapped back, almost kind of the pendulum swung in such a way that was like, wow, that's not what we expected.
Right.
But from a digital perspective, it's made us sit there and go, we had to zero base a lot of things. And we had to go, so time out. For the last 18 months, we've been able to get away without having a bulletin, without doing certain things. And I'm sitting there going, what if we don't bring those things back?
Right.
What if
like what really matters now?
Yeah. So like the question we asked was like, okay, if I'm not printing the bulletin, what if I just outsourced all of our graphic design? Like there's wonderful places that can do it for a flat rate. They'll do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Well, that was a huge like shift. And my team was like, so yeah, I was like, so what if we got rid of all the designers and said, instead we'll take all that money and let's spend that money on people who can either develop the digital side for us or capture stuff that we can then put on all of our platforms.
Right.
That was a huge post-COVID thing for us because the team radically looks different at that point. And
right.
So, and we're still tweaking that. But I think for us, the pain was, I think for me was honestly with some team members that probably have always, who I would say they got the mission confused with the method. And so what happened was for a lot of us, one of the pain points was they were so locked into certain methods that we had to remind them of the mission and say, hey, we got to change our method if we're still going to do this mission.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably a philosophical shift of, guys, lose the method. The way you've always done it, lose that method because that method's no longer accomplishing that mission. And for a lot of team members, a lot of even volunteers, they were like, I don't know if I can do that. So as a leader, for me, that was probably one of the hardest things I've had to walk people through, like the fact they've done the same thing for 15 years a certain way. And we're not going to do it that way because they were just so in love with the method that we had to go back and remind them of the mission.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. What does the team look like today? Like
yeah,
sort of number of people on the team, what roles you have them in.
So the way we do it is I actually have one, we have one art director or senior graphic designer. I have somebody then I've got one full-time photographer. I got one full-time person who's solely focused on short form video. So think YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
Then I have one person who coordinates all of that, who basically think of it like they have a master map of all social media accounts and they're just making sure all the buckets are full. So you got that. I have one team that's our storytelling team. So they're 2 video producers who solely focus on really storytelling, long form video.
Yeah.
And then I've got what I would call, because we're a multi-site, I have what I call I got 3 project managers who kind of manage all the projects because just all the little time they're doing stuff like they're doing the digital bulletin, all of those type of things.
Right.
I've got a developer who handles the website, whose job is develop and keep that thing up and running along with some other stuff. And then I have somebody who oversees all the digital side and somebody who oversees all the promotions. So that's kind of the framework of the team. And then I've got a couple some administrative help, but we kind of divide the team up into two sections. We have the creative side and the project management side. So that's kind of how the 2 things are branched out.
Yeah. Short form content is fascinating. One of my kids, I mean, kind of one of them for sure, YouTube Shorts is like literally all he watches. Like if he's watching something, like he's at home, he's playing some video game with friends online and he's got YouTube Shorts playing.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing, And then another one of my sons is super into like action figures like Marvel and Transformers and that kind of stuff. And so he's watching videos. These ones usually aren't shorts, but he's watching YouTube again. And it's all, just YouTube content that people are creating. Yeah. But shorts are fascinating to me because it feels like that style is what's winning right now.
It is. So it's so funny. We looked at the analytics yesterday and we didn't realize that YouTube has now become our most popular channel for all of our content. We were like, hey, did somebody check that? I was like,
did I read that? Me though. Like it really does. When I watch my kids and I know they're, it's just my little, thing here, but I'm like, man, YouTube, it's like, and their shorts are just overtaking Instagram and all the others, like little by little. It's not, I mean, the other platforms are very big, but
right.
YouTube already has this built-in user base.
Yeah. So for us, some of the realizations we had was with the short form video was, really there was almost two categories, in the sense that when I'm on, say, like Instagram Reels, and Instagram Stories for that matter, our goal is we're going to try to hit our local audience. That's what it's about. But when I get to Shorts and TikTok, we started noticing we would have stuff go viral, if you will, but it wasn't liked by people that were in any of our networks. There were people outside that. And so I told the team, I said, you need to think about Instagram as still a social network, and Facebook and all of that. But when we get to YouTube Shorts and we get TikTok, think of it like Netflix. It is a different distribution channel by which there's different ways of how it's getting out to our audience. Mm-hmm. So we've had to think through, like, what does that mean for how we create content? So are we going to put that much effort into a distribution that may or may not hit our target audience who lives in a 5-mile radius around us?
Right.
That we could do that. So this is one of the things that we're wrestling with. We had a long meeting yesterday about this, but short form video for us, like, if we get the right audio, that's a trending audio with the right thing, 2 or 3 things hit. And the other thing for me as a leader is where I've had to be okay with is they'll give me something and I'll kind of go, I would not watch that in a million years. But I realize I'm of a certain age, of a certain demographic, and that's not who we're trying to reach.
Yeah.
And sure enough, 9 times out of 10, I'm wrong.
Right.
And they were right.
Old, bro.
And it works.
You're old.
I'm old.
You don't get it anymore.
I don't. And I'm okay with that. Yep. I don't vibe, as the kids say these days. I mean, when you have an employee look at you and say, I just need some time to vibe, I'm like, I don't know what that means, but as long as you're hitting your deadlines, I don't care.
Totally. Oh, that's too good, man. That's too good. Yeah, it's fascinating. So what, like, how much effort do you guys spend in, like, trying to reach people online? Like, I'm thinking, like, doing church online, you obviously are probably doing that. You're doing, obviously, the social media and web and all the things. Are you guys focused on, like, I'm trying to reach new people and bring them in the building via my online channels, or do you think about it differently? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do ultimately?
So I think for us, we really think of it's probably twofold. One is we're trying to reinforce our current audience that's already bought into who we are.
Okay.
And it is probably encouraging / equipping, if you will, as much as you can equip online in some way, shape, or form. So there's that aspect of it. For us, though, when it comes to reaching our audience, we found at the end of the day, you have to spend money to do that. So for us, it's really about ads. Our ads actually perform quite well on Google and on Instagram.
Okay.
When we did Easter, we were super thrilled with that. So our focus on that is we are definitely going after somebody who's new to the community or hitting certain criteria. So that's where we'll spend that effort. Yeah. But if I'm just creating stuff that's like, I know it's going to go in an Instagram story, it's really for our audience that's already bought into who we are. Yeah. I don't think we're going to pull people in the ads. And so that's why if you would look at our stuff that's on our Instagram account, and then if you look at our ads, they look totally radically different.
Right.
Because the ads are low hanging fruit, easy call to action. It's versus the Instagram stories, which is try to be a little more deeper dive into some stuff, try to be more a little theologically rich, if you will, on that kind of stuff. So, but our end game, but like the online church, all that stuff, I mean, we've come to a realization that, like, we do have people that watch us online and they will check us out before they come into a brick and mortar. We are a firm belief that if we do any of that stuff, we're driving you to the brick and mortar. We want you to actually physically come worship with us. We're never going to do the thing where we're going to do an online church and an online small group. A lot of churches, that works well for them. That's part of their DNA. Yeah. It's just, this was it. So to go back to the COVID thing real quick, we were having a serious discussion about, do we hire an online pastor? Do we have this? And do we have this? And I was like, I said, guys, we can do all this. I just can tell you that in 18 months, our DNA is going to revolt. And that person's going to feel pushed out because all of a sudden this stuff is going to die. And to be honest, we had a really hard conversation where we had some heavy disagreements.
Right.
And I think I was proved right 18 months later when I've got a lot of friends who I love dearly at churches who are online pastors. They're no longer online pastors. They're now moved into a different role in the church. So we had to come to that realization of what is true to our DNA as a church. And we realized that was not really true to our DNA, and that was okay.
Right.
That we were going to survive. We were going to be fine.
Yeah. That's actually really cool, because I just think that's true for every church, right? Like what is your church and what are your strengths? And I think COVID forced every church to get better at doing things online, like all the things, or hopefully it made everyone better. But I think your average church in America, like, can't do church online and church in the building well, because they don't have enough resources or staff. And then you're a big church going, look, it's not even our DNA. It's not about doing it well or not. Like, you probably could do it well if you chose to force it and push it through brute force, but it's not your DNA. So let's just do what we do really well. Let's have the online stuff. Like, you probably still stream services and do some of the basics, but you're not like really focused on making that like who you are.
Yeah, I say, like, a lot of times when it comes to churches and like the digital transformation is you have to look back at your DNA and you have to ask yourself, what was the genesis of the church? Like, how did it start? Because those things are always going to be buried deep inside of your church. They are. So like, if you were a church that was born in the TikTok era, Instagram era, you were probably going to have an easier time making that transition, because you were, from day one, you were all digital.
Right.
But if you were like us, we are a church that's 50 plus years old. We can get there. You just have to understand there's a lot of stuff that may not translate. That's going to take time to get there, and some stuff that will never translate.
Right.
It just simply won't.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump into I guess the talk of the hour. I'm fascinated by it, but AI is overtaking the world. Everybody, doesn't probably matter what age you are at this point, you're hearing about AI, or hearing about ChatGPT, or all the things. And you work in a space where I think the tools, the AI tools that are popping up actually are really helpful. So how are you guys thinking about AI, especially, in the context of digital transformation and your team kind of morphing and changing as things go, and all that? Like, what's your take? Let's start there. What's your take on AI?
So about 18 months ago, I would say about 18 months ago, if you notice, I didn't mention I have an editor on staff or copywriter on my staff when I gave you that staff listing.
Yeah.
And that was 18 months ago. I did have one. And then I brought her into my office and said, hey, I want to show you some of these tools that I've been playing around with. And one of them was Jasper. Yeah. And she looked at me and she goes, am I going to be out of a job? And I was like, look, I love you. We're not getting ready. You're fine. And then she was like, but eventually she decided, God called her away to another ministry. And I was like, looked at the team and said, we're not hiring that person back.
Right.
I said, between Grammarly, between Jasper, and between these things, we can recreate our editor.
Right.
And I would tell you, it gets about 85% right.
Yeah.
The other 15% is like, we wouldn't say that. Let's do this. Let's tweak that. Let's tweak that. But a couple of things we've been playing with and we've been having fun with is I took all of my pastor's sermons and I uploaded it to Chatbase and basically created a chat bot where you could have a conversation with our pastor.
Right.
And that freaked him out a little bit. I didn't, side note, tell your pastor you're going to do that before you actually do that. I didn't do that. I just did it. And that was a lot, but that kind of gave us some ideas of like what the future is going to look like for us in terms of some other things we're looking at. But some of the things that was really helped us for us is that we do a weekly podcast. Well, the thing with a weekly podcast is based off of the sermon. And so that means I've got to go listen to the sermon. I got to create questions. Well, now I have a tool that just upload the entire sermon. It turns around, gives me the outline of the sermon, gives me what they think study group questions would be. It basically does all the work and then turns around, creates me the podcast description, keywords. Basically, within a matter of 30 minutes, it does what takes about 2 hours of the work is done.
Right.
The other thing that we've been playing with is that we're looking at a tool that basically we could upload it and then it'll convert the whole thing along with the tone of the voice to a different language. So I played with it and did a version of our podcast, which is a 4-person podcast. I did it in Spanish and my wife was one of the co-hosts. And I was like, that sounds like my wife, a Spanish version of my wife.
Wow.
So that's going to give us the ability to because we do have a Spanish ministry, it's going to allow us to kind of do some additional cool things. And then there's obviously on the design side, we've gotten to the point now where like we can move really quick on just doing little things like that person, that photo is not smiling. Okay, let me do X, Y, and Z, and now they're smiling. So there's that low hanging fruit. But for us, I've told the team, I said, look, don't look at this like it's replacing you. Look at it like it's a new tool to put in your toolkit. And if you embrace it as a tool in your toolkit and you learn how to master the tool, you will all of a sudden become a lot more effective as a team member.
Right.
So that's for us. It's a lot of like the low hanging fruit was the editorial stuff. That was easy stuff. The heavy lifting for us is in the next, I would say 18 months, as the video and the audio gets better. That's what we're going to do a deep dive into. We're going to spend a lot more time. We had already played with synthesis, and I already created some avatars by which we had some talking head videos that were not real people. We've already played with some of that, but I think we are about 18 months away from us fully having that whole workflow built just solely based on AI doing a lot of those things for us.
I mean, what are you most like wowed by or shocked by in all of this? So, because it sounds like you've been actually actively, like you're doing stuff with these tools.
I think for me, what has gotten me, it's not the video, audio, deep fake stuff or whatever. Like I knew that's always existed on some level. It's the natural language capabilities, which I think is really fascinating to me, that I feel like I'm having a dialogue with the machine, and then and ChatGPT comes back with something that feels authoritative, answers. It could be completely wrong, but it's acting like it's right. And I get why people would go, oh yeah, that's right. So for me, my dream scenario is that I'm going to be able to pick 3 or 4 theological textbooks that our church has said, yes on these.
Yeah.
I'm able to take my pastor's sermons. I'm going to take certain versions of the Bible. I'm going to slam it all together and create a chat bot that says, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Ask the chat bot. And 24/7, people can ask this chat bot questions. And I know within a certain degree of accuracy, it's going to get the person exactly what we want the person to get them. Right. That to me is exciting. What it means for me in my role is I have to walk alongside ministers who feel like, am I being replaced? I'm like, no. You don't understand. Your job was not your job was not to be Wikipedia for theology.
Right.
We're not training people to win Bible quizzes. We're training people to be disciple makers.
Right.
The AI can't do disciple making.
Right.
That is still, so again, it's parallel to the conversation about mission versus method. And so while I've had to walk my team through that, part of my role in general for the church as a whole is to walk the church through these type of changes. So that's what excites me. But again, I know that change curve is going to come. It's going to be kind of difficult for some of our folks.
We've been working on a tool for a couple of years now called Sermonly. So it's sermon writing for pastors, right? But it's free. It's this fun thing. It helps you with like organizing and some stuff, but then AI hits and we're like, okay, now this thing is like interesting, right? And what you just described, like these, like, theology books, these versions of the Bible, the pastor stuff, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're a denomination and you say everything from this denominational, like material, put it in, all in there. And then pastors can like kind of have a sermon writing research assistant co-pilot type of thing, right? That's kind of based on their body of whatever you want to call it, research, right? Like their kind of core stuff. Like, is your pastor, you got a new one coming in, like, is that something that you're chatting with them about, or like, we're using ChatGPT even to do some of this?
Yeah. So I showed my pastor a sermon that I created with ChatGPT. He decided to write a blog article about it, and then it got picked up by the Associated Press, which I just laughed at, because his point was, in some respects, that pastors have to realize that the sermon you preach is the one you live your life, is how you live your life. Right. It's not going to be what's on the stage. So I think for me, we're walking through that. We're talking through what that looks like for them. And I think for some of them, they don't want to live in that world. We have 9 campus pastors, and some have varying degrees on some are like, I'm not into that. Some are like, I'm going to totally embrace that. Yeah. So it's walking them through that and saying like, it's going to be okay. Yeah. So I'm excited. But there's definitely some fear and trepidation
like,
on that.
AI writing my sermon, I think would freak any pastor out, right?
Yeah.
But AI being because every pastor is, prompted by God, by the Spirit, and something's on their heart, and then they're sort of building a sermon and then preaching a sermon based on lots of things, right? Like God's prompting, the Bible, obviously, your life experience, what's going on in the church, like all the stuff kind of gets brought into what's coming out. But they all do research, right? Like they all, or some pastors have like teams, right, that help with sermon writing and doing research and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's more like the research side, the like I'm looking for scriptures or, like stories or connecting dots from this part of the Bible to that part of the Bible, like all the stuff you're doing to kind of do research. That's where this becomes like a superpower.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the way I look at it. It's like a superpower. It's a research assistant tool.
Yeah.
And I think for some pastors in some churches, it maybe even go back to saying, I need to go back and redo my job description, because I think what you really need me ultimately to do, again, it's little mission method again. It's, hey, I may not spend 30 hours now researching a sermon. Okay, so now I freed up 20 hours.
Right.
What's the best way I can spend the 20 hours to help us figure out how we can accomplish our mission? And so for some leaders, some guys, that'll be a struggle. For some leaders, that'll be like a huge weight off their back.
Right.
And they go, okay, wow, now I can do mentoring.
Right.
Now I can do coaching. I can invest in younger leaders. So to me, that's
disciple making, like you said. Like, I love
exactly
like leadership training, disciple making, mentoring, like all those things that, I guess should be part somehow in there, right? I know every kind of pastor can be like, different churches do different things. But it should free up a bunch of time.
It should.
And at some point, I'm going to send you a link to Sermonly. I just want to get your feedback on it. Cause I think you're living in that world and it would be cool. Well, like before we wrap, I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions, but like before we get there, I mean, where's your head right now? Like AI, these tools, like digital transformation, like what are you seeing in the church and in the world that you live in? Kind of where are we headed?
So I think what I would say is that I think we are probably on the precipice of every 500 years, the church goes through some massive transformation. And it's typically, not to get too long-winded, but here's the thing is we know that if you look at what we call general purpose technologies, so that would be a thing that like something that everybody eventually adopts, TV, cars, automobiles. If you look at the cycle, and the cycle of general purpose technologies. So if you look at the cycle, we got 7 technologies that we've got in the first year 2023. So we've adapted a lot of technology really fast. That typically means historically that the church is about to reimagine its identity, significance, and purpose. Like, what does it mean to be the church in the world? And I think AI was kind of like this tip. I think iPhone, all that stuff. I think AI to me is AI, and I would even say I'd go say is AR and VR, given what Apple announced, is like the tipping point that all of a sudden is going to push us into this thing. So my head is kind of going, we got to be okay with a lot of things breaking.
Right.
A lot of things are going to break. Denominations are going to break. Social structures in terms of how we organize are going to break as a church. They just are going to do that. And the good news for me is I think at the end of the day, the local church, that part I don't think is going to break. It's just all this apparatuses around us are probably going to change.
Right.
So it's an exciting time because I think you get to reimagine what the local church looks like. You get to ask yourself, hey, if we don't have to have all these staff because AI is now answering the phone for us and doing all this other stuff, where can we deploy those resources somewhere else?
Right.
I think now I think the ability for you to imagine this now, for me to start a church, to build a website, to have the podcast recorded, to have do all this stuff. I can literally do all this stuff with AI, so much stuff with AI now that like all the heaviness, administrative lifting is just like gone away. For us to plant churches, we should be able to do more rapid rate. We'll be able to do a lot more things. So for me, it's an exciting time. I used to be a real big pessimist, and I would tell you over the last 18 months, I've turned into this big optimist, because the more I've seen it actually work, and the more I've seen people embrace it, the more I'm like, oh no, this is actually a really good thing. It's going to be painful, but it's a really good thing. But I think we are in that Martin Luther 500 years ago, he tacked the 985 Theses up on the board, and it's like the whole world just changes. I think we're on the precipice of that again, and we're going to have a new. It's going to be a fun ride, I would say, as we try to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be fun for those who embrace it. It's going to be painful for those who like resist, because it's here, right? Like it's here, it's happening. This AI thing is like steamrolling, and then everything that will, I guess, come as it relates to AI and all the tech. But I love that. Okay, couple quick rapid fire questions. Yeah, first one, give me a book that you just think everybody should read. It could be any kind of book. Like, doesn't have
let's go with 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Oh, love it. Bringing it all the way into the tech world. I like it.
Yeah. That's a fantastic book that he's just so black and white, and so again, he gives you a really good way of framework on how to think about the future, which is why I like that book.
Love it. Okay, give me a podcast that you're listening to right now.
Podcast I'm listening to right now. Let's go with Deep Questions by Cal Newport.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote Deep Work, Digital Minimalism. So much of his work I've read, and Digital Minimalism, I think, is like, for every believer, I think is almost, I want to make it a must read, because he gets to the heart of the crux of how to navigate a digital world without losing your soul, which I love a lot.
That's great. I mean, we all need that, right? Our kids need it. We need it as parents, trying to help our kids, like all the things. So those are great, man. Tell us where we can go to learn more about you or connect with you online. Where can listeners?
Probably the easiest thing to do is probably hit me up on either LinkedIn or Instagram. It's my last name Girardier. But most likely LinkedIn actually is where, surprisingly, like,
first one.
I don't know. Again, I'm probably the first one to say LinkedIn.
You're the first one to say LinkedIn. You win,
Frank. I'm turning into an old man. Let's just state the facts. I'm promoting LinkedIn.
I'm not vibing with you on this one, Darrel.
I'm clearly. I don't know. I mean, you can say Twitter, but like, I always joke, like, Twitter is where people get fired, so I don't spend a lot of time there. I mean, just like, hey, for those of you who don't know, I'm Southern Baptist. I did 4 weeks ago have to give a speech in front of my entire staff. I said, just do me one favor, stay off of Twitter during the Southern Baptist Convention. If you can do that, we'll all be happy.
I can ask you your take on the vote. I was there. Tithely was a sponsor.
Oh yeah,
we were there. Surprised we didn't run into each other, but we'll just leave that one be. We won't even jump into that.
I'd like to keep my job, Frank. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Amen. Darrel,
thank you.
It's been awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Dude, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you on next week's episode. See ya.